family in December loved Christmas a lot, but the mom, who did all the shopping, did not. It could be, perhaps, that their budget was too tight. Or it could be that her husband watched Elf for the 12th time that night.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? How's the sound? How's it going? I can hear you. Tonight I'm drinking Lagunitas. Although I have some other options as well. Last time I was drinking Polar Ice.
Polar Seltzer.
Polar Seltzer. Calm down. Polar Seltzer and Tito's Vodka. We have that on the menu as well. But I'm getting started with a nice IPA. This is the only tolerable IPA, in my opinion, that I drink. So I don't know if that's a controversial opinion or if, kind of seems like IPAs had their moment and it's kind of passed. Just my view. Who is crying because Xmas is stressful? Because I empathize with that. As always, keep hydrated. I got this big boy right here. That is H2O. One moment. I have not yet perfected the art of where I put these screens. I have the week off next week, the entire week. So I think I'm going to get it sorted out. I think I'm going to have a more professional studio setup in here at some point. But as of yet, it's just kind of, I'm just kind of all, if I feel if it seems like I'm a little scatterbrained, it's because I don't know what I'm doing really. All right, well, I guess let's get going. Hello and welcome to this very special live installment of Nightmare Masterclass. My name is David Stockdale. I will be your host on this excursion into the dark unknown. So if you're not aware, I have been in the process of reviewing the earlier videos of Petscop as a part of my preparation for the next installment of my investigation series. In my last live stream, I went over the first 3 videos and went off on a few tangents in the process. If you haven't figured it out, the major difference between my normal videos and me in a live stream is that I go off on tangents and I don't have anyone editing me, so you're just getting unfiltered Dave right now. And my brain is a mess, so welcome to hell. And if I'm looking over occasionally, it's because my girlfriend occasionally gives me sarcastic looks because my jokes are lame and stupid, and you know how that goes. But anyway, I figured I would just pick up where I left off. So we're going to be starting with Petscop 4. I'm not sure exactly how many videos we're going to get through today. It probably just depends on when I run out of steam, which, it can vary. It's been a day, so I can't guarantee that I'm going to last very long. Just a bit of housekeeping before we get started. I unintentionally ignored a $100 donation on my last live stream. So I just wanted to give a quick shout out to the user Null Ripper. Thank you, Null Ripper, for that very generous, I would say ridiculously generous donation. And mea culpa. I apologize for ignoring your donation. It was not intentional. Like I said, I'm still trying to figure out the screen situation, and, you know, these things happen. I'm sorry. Anyway. Also, you know, I seem to not have great luck when it comes to live streams. My last live stream just cut off around the 2-hour mark because Comcast just took a shit. It was not just my house. It was just like there was an internet outage in the area. So hopefully we'll be in the clear this time around. But, you know, fingers crossed. And okay, just a quick note on the status of my next video. Part 6 of the Petscop Investigation is slowly but surely in progress. It was probably a bit too optimistic to say that I'm going to have it by the end of December. More realistically, it's going to be up at January at some point. We'll see. I would estimate probably towards the beginning of January, I think is fair. I think that's realistic at this point. It depends on how much work I'm able to get done in the next week. Like I said, I have the next week off, but the holidays kind of complicate things, obviously. So, but this means that more likely than not, this is going to be my last video of 2018. So happy holidays, and have a happy new year and all that. Anyone got any good New Year's resolutions? Anyone? Bueller? I want to hear some resolutions before we get going. No. Corrupted hot dog. No. Acquire Switch. That's a good resolution. Nico Schmiko. Thank you for the super chat. That's very nice. Should love your thoughts and videos. Thank you for what you do. I appreciate that. It's, you know, YouTube is like the Wild West, so it's really nice to get, you know, some nice comments every now and then. You got to savor them because they're few and far between. I'm just kidding. Don't give me you know, my Midwestern sensibilities. With my Midwestern sensibilities, compliments actually make me very uncomfortable. So this is a bit of an affect. Me just, you know, being gracious and saying thank you. But really inside, when someone gives me a compliment, it just kind of makes my anus clench. Like I just feel, I just feel intensely uncomfortable with any sort of compliment. So. Yeah, you're better off insulting me, honestly, because that I understand. I understand insults. You're speaking my language. It's probably the wrong move to ask on a live stream for people to insult me. That's probably not the right move, but, you know, whatever. I'm just doing me, right? Okay. I guess let's get going. So I got my screen open here. Let's do the full screen. Hold on a minute. So we're starting with the fourth video, which is like 2 minutes long. notably shorter than the previous videos. Well, now I can't see my chat, so 1 second. Bear with me. That doesn't help.
You're saying that it covered your face too, like your video when you expanded it.
I think it looks okay now. Garrett Faust, thank you for the super chat. Another compliment. Oh, just, you're killing me tonight. I think I got it sorted out. As the Canadians would say, I think I have it sorted. If you're lucky tonight, you're gonna get a Jordan Peterson impression. Just wait till I get a few drinks in me. A Jordan P. Peterson, as it were. All right, let's get going.
So if you remember what I was trying to explain yesterday and failed to explain, I'm just going to demonstrate that to you now.
I know what I want to point out here. Hold on.
Yeah. So I found this yesterday. And the way I understand this is... So, we're upstairs right now. You just saw me walk up some stairs. So, if you were to imagine what would be exactly below where I'm standing right now, and I worked it out, it's roughly the area where you have the big screen with the windmill. And so I think, this I think is a camera.
This is kind of interesting. Thank you, Alana Owens, for the super chat. She's asking if I'm covering all of the videos tonight, and that is way too ambitious. In the last live stream, which was like 2 hours long, I covered 3 videos. So, due to my long-windedness, that is highly unlikely. I'll just say that. So I had some notes here. What I wanted to say about this part, Paul tries to explain his reasoning a little bit, like he's trying to explain something to somebody, and he goes into detail about having to imagine like an upper level and a lower level, which makes it self-evident just based on the stairs. And you have the camera there, and the game requires you to employ some abstract reasoning to imagine this below area in the game here. And it's a very basic level of abstract reasoning, but at this point it's very basic. But I would say that it's interesting because it's sort of like the game as a part of a very elaborate conditioning process starts Paul off with like relatively easy tasks, right? Like in the very first video, you solve these these puzzles that are fairly trivial and fairly easy to solve, and then they gradually get more and more complex as the series progresses, right? So in the fourth, this is the fourth video here. It's pretty obvious by like video 14 that these tasks are getting incredibly complex. Like Paul has to extrapolate, like he has to perform these elaborate movements and extrapolate those movements so that like the demo sequence can so that he can do his thing in the demo sequence that plays later. So he's operating like totally blind. And that's the 14th video. So these puzzles get progressively more and more complex as the series progresses. And so we'll go. I think I'm going to touch on that in my next video, but I just wanted to point it out here because it's worth noting that we get, it's pretty obvious based on this fourth video that like there's being something set up here. I think it's obvious in hindsight that like this sort of abstract reasoning that like is continually a part of the gameplay process for Paul is something that like gradually becomes more and more like the central component of like what he's doing. And it's almost like, I guess you would call it like a fetishization of puzzles. Like that gets gradually more and more intense. Yeah. There's definitely more to say about that, but I'll just leave it there.
And if I walk in this direction, this is roughly where the windmill would be. Why there isn't actually a windmill here, I don't know. It looks sort of like a placeholder for it.
Yet another example of, so, Paul speculates that this is a placeholder for the windmill. And again, it's abstract reasoning is like a central component here of the gameplay process. So, yeah, it's worth noting. Oh, and I had a random thought.
Yeah, I think
I'm probably not prepared to talk about this, but what it kind of reminds me of is there's this philosophical concept that it's called the is-ought distinction, or that a philosopher named David Hume came up with. And it's basically, I'm going to butcher this explanation, so please, any philosophers in the stream, feel free to correct me. But it's sort of a way of saying that there's a distinction between is claims, facts about the world, empirical claims about the world, versus ought claims, like what one should do, what one ought to do, like in a moral sense. And what Hume said is basically that you cannot derive an ought claim from an is claim. That is like, you can't derive what's right in moral terms based on simple facts about the world, based on simple empirical observations about the world, right? So in Petscop, you get this sort of this series of gradually more and more complex puzzles that are logically they become more and more complex, but you never get the ought. You never once get like what should happen, right? You never get a sense of whether or not Paul is doing the right thing, right in the moral sense. Paul knows he's doing the right thing in the logical sense because he is able to continually work his way through this like logical maze. So he knows, and he's rewarded for that with more information and more, and just by advancing through the game, he's rewarded for that as a part of this like conditioning process. But, so he knows that what he's doing is correct logically, right? But we have to always think about the ought, like what should happen, what ought to happen, because we do get various indications. We'll see in the next video, we get various indications that things are horribly amiss, right? So maybe logic is not all there is to it, and maybe the simple, quote unquote facts about the game are maybe just looking at that in a vacuum is kind of misleading, right? So yeah, I guess I'll continue now.
Understanding is correct. It's just I'm missing something. Okay, that's it.
Interesting to note that he says right there,
okay,
he says, I'm missing something. And I believe this is the video where there is, if you up the contrast, or you if you up the contrast or kind of change the coloration here, you can see another figure lurking in the background right around the time he says, I'm missing something here. So he literally is missing something. So that's fun. Move on to the 5th video. Someone's saying, I assume he's talking about Hume, and the is-ought distinction, that our direct observation of the world does not necessarily dictate how things ought to be, only what they are. Right. Yes. And that has a bit to do with the naturalistic fallacy, right? Which is sort of the inverse of that claim, right? Because like sort of justifying the way things are by saying this is what's natural, right? The natural world has given rise to these conditions, and that's what is natural, so that's what is correct. And so that's the naturalistic fallacy. So the correct counter argument to the naturalistic fallacy is just to say, well, just because even assuming your premises are true, even assuming that this is natural, that doesn't mean it's morally right. That doesn't mean it's the way things should be, and ideally. Yeah, so good point. Oh, another thing I wanted to point out is, does anyone actually know what the whole windmill thing is about? Because Paul sort of relates it to the door riddle that occurs in the 14th video. Insofar as he thinks they're both kind of like riddles, right? So, you know, like, I kind of imagine there are like different layers to it, and but I'm not actually sure. On one level, I think like it is a very practical mechanic. The windmill appearing and disappearing at various points in the game, directly related to certain actions that Paul takes. It's a very practical mechanic that helps motivate Paul to continue progressing in the game. But, you know, like, I guess I'm just wondering if there's also like a thematic component to the windmill appearing and disappearing. We know it's related to this backstory of, you know, the speaker in one of these, you know, pieces of dialogue saying, you know, the windmill disappeared, you know, where did it go? What did you do? So kind of like speaking in an accusatory way. And I've speculated that this Rainer, this character known as Rainer, it might actually be the person who created the game, and they're making a real world accusation. So what I'm curious about is how the windmill disappearing is thematically related to that. Because I guess I'm just not making I guess I'm just not making the connection at this point. So I don't know. Like, you know, that's just something I want to throw out there. Someone says, I think it represents the grinding effect of the foster system. We see that a child is required for its function, but it also appears to be damaged by it. So is a child required for the functioning of the windmill? Because I know about the child library system, right? But about the windmill specifically, I'm not sure. Someone is saying that Don Quixote must be relevant, at least on the surface level. Yeah, I could see that. But yeah, let's continue. Let's proceed.
Alright, so I spent a while with this, just asking as many questions as I could think of. Mostly like short 3-word things. And most of the questions that I asked just produced no answer. Or the default answer, which is I don't know. Most of them just gave me that, except for 4 of them. And I'm going to go through each of those 4 now. The first of the 4 was, who is Tiara? And capitalization does not make a difference. But who is Tiara? I also tried who is Care, who is Mike, who is Michael, and I tried other forms too, like just Care, just Mike, just Michael. This is the only one that gave me anything. Next one that I tried, I think. Yeah.
I don't have much to say about this part at this point, other than what I've already said in my Petscop Investigation series, that there does seem to be like a central question here of whether or not there's an entity in the game. And this whole like question and answer dynamic seems to like serve that function. It's making the viewer question whether or not there's someone behind these answers, right? It's making Paul question that as well. Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the first new maker illusion that occurs in the game, right? It's the first illusion we get. So I have talked a lot about that already, so I won't harp on it too much. But I do tend to wonder at this point, like, if the series is not doing the same thing to the viewer that it's doing to Paul, if that makes sense. Like, you know, it's corrupting him by luring him into this like series of puzzles that get gradually more and more complicated. And I think the new maker illusion might well serve that function for the viewer, if that makes sense. So it's like an aspect of the game that lures us in because of the like really horrific implication. Like we get a very obvious indication of the genre's work in the first video when Paul says that he's like trying to prove something about this game that he found, which is like a dead, you know, like that's, you know, a trope of a creepypasta, right? And then we get this sort of dead giveaway in the second video with Michael Hammond's grave, right? That's a dead giveaway, obviously. Okay, now we're completely in the realm of creepypasta horror, but you know, it's in that, it's along those lines, right? And now in the fifth video, we have an allusion to like a real world horrific incident. It almost seems like what's happening to Paul with his with this series of logical puzzles that get more and more complicated is similar to what's happening with the really ominous illusions that like any genre savvy viewer is going to be able to identify. So there's a really unsettling sort of parallel, I think. Thank you, Chewy Gumdrop, for the super chat. Yes. So tilting at windmills is the Don Quixote reference, right? I would have to like read up on exactly what that reference means, but it's like, you know, basically when people use that expression, it means they're attacking like an imaginary enemy, like they're just a fool, basically, right? So I don't know who the fool is in this case. Is it Paul? For, you know, basically assuming there's an entity in the game. Is he a fool for thinking along those lines and continuing despite that? I don't know. But that very well could be, you know, that's a good literary reference there to keep in mind. So, yeah. Cool. Maybe the fool is us. Entirely possible. But at least I'm a fool who just got $2 from your super chat. Let's proceed.
Next, I asked, where am I? And then I asked, who are you? I don't know why that just happened.
So that's an interesting moment. You know, as soon as Paul says, who are you? The tool turns this bright pinkish, like magenta. I don't know. What would you call that color? As soon as he says, who are you? That's when the tool engages, as it were. Dave the Hero, thank you for the super chat. Says thank you very much for the content. Thank you very much, Dave, for the super chat. I don't know what to say. Thank you.
Yeah, so I was saying, who are you? Yeah.
And even the
I don't know why that just changed color.
the
out of
prompt
nowhere.
changes color as well.
I think it broke. Yeah, I don't think that even just registered at all.
Yeah.
Or
And there it happens.
okay.
Turn off PlayStation. So this is like the
So
next.
that's not what it said before when I put in that question. Did not look anything like that.
One of my favorite moments in the series. So this is the next component in a series of components that sort of make it a dead giveaway that this is heading into like the creepypasta realm, right? But there's definitely more to say about it. So I've said in previous, I think I said in my last live stream that Petscop is almost like a commentary on creepypasta as a genre, almost, and in some ways it's like subverting it, right? And I have this idea that it's not really an idea, but more of like an observation that I'm trying to flesh out a little bit. So like the important thing to keep in mind here is that like creepypastas are nothing new. They're nothing like special or new. It's just like a contemporary online version of like an urban legend or a ghost story that you would tell over a campfire, you know, something along those lines, right? And The thing about these stories is that they can always kind of be boiled down to certain essential elements. Yes? Like, the calls are coming from inside the house, or, like the hook on the car door, right? These are things that we immediately in our culture identify. We know what you're talking about, right? For the most part. Genre savvy people know what you're talking about. So in a sense, these things are memes, right? In the academic sense of the term. Like, they're ideas that spread and replicate over time, and, they compete with other ideas in a way that resembles natural selection, where one of these ideas persists for whatever reason, and the others die off, like survival of the fittest. But of course, the term "fittest" here is like a very loaded term, right? We have to defer back to the naturalist. This observation that Hume made, that just because something is natural doesn't mean it's right. So, like, just because something is quote unquote fit in our world, right? Especially in the case of an idea, that doesn't mean it's right. That just means it's fit. So like a meme that spreads and evolves over time, when we think of a meme in this academic sense of the word, where it replicates, like a negative connotation would be a virus. Viruses do the same thing, right? So, but what I wanted, so in a sense that urban legends or ghost stories or creepypastas are very, they're meme-like in nature. They're in the academic sense of the word, where they're copied and they replicate. But I should point out that, like, despite some superficial similarities, Petscop isn't a work that it's not a creepypasta, like, not strictly speaking. Like, categorically, it's a bit harder. It's a bit more difficult to place, right? And Petscop is definitely not subject to, like, memification, as it were, in the way that these other stories generally are. That this might, like, that will come as a surprise to frequenters of the Petscop subreddit or the Discord, who, like, if you go there, you'll see all sorts of memes that are based on Petscop. That's not exactly what I'm talking about. What I would argue is that Petscop can't be memified, without losing some, like, essential element of the work, without it being lost, if that makes sense. Like, what would be lost in the case of Petscop is this sort of formal complexity that is ingrained in the work. Like, you could almost make the case that this complexity is, like, the definitive quality of Petscop. That's kind of what lures you in about it. So that's something that intrinsically can't be memified in the way that, like, the calls are coming from inside the house is memified, right? That's a meme. Yeah. And like, this complexity being, like, an intrinsic part of what Petscop is, in formal terms, is, like, that sounds like highfalutin and pretentious when I put it that way. I'm very self-aware. I know that I sound pretentious right now, but I say that complexity is like an intrinsic part of the work. The reason I'm saying that is because, like, how do you convey what Petscop is to someone who lacks references for this sort of thing? Like, it's a fictional horror series that takes the form of a Let's Play, and it's a totally made up game. So the actual physical video game does not exist in the real world. It's made up for the purposes of this fictional story. And it seems to have a bunch of these very ominous references and allusions. And, you know, if you try to explain that to someone without any, like, if they don't have any reference for what you're talking about, and you try to explain that, they'll literally just stare at you blankly, because it's like, you know, it's way too much to take in. It's too much information to take in like one sentence, right? In one like singular description. So it's like the series is impervious to like simplification. I guess that might be a more clear way of describing it. And you know, this is a challenge in my own life, because the investigation series is like one of my most watched things on the channel. So it's often like incumbent upon me to sort of describe it to people who may not understand what I'm talking about. So this is a challenge that I face sometimes. And someone else, yeah, and literally no element of the Petscop universe is trustworthy or reliable. Yeah, like every single component of the work makes you doubt its own veracity. Yeah, that's true. I'm getting another beer. Un momento. Yeah, some people are doing a better job than me of doing like an elevator pitch for Petscop. You know, I'm not good at these elevator pitches. I'm not like a marketing person. You know, so someone says Petscop is a cryptic horror series disguised as like a 2000s, you know, era PlayStation game. That's a very succinct way of describing it. So good job. Oh dear, Lord Varanus. Lord Varanus says communism is like veganism. It works if you don't like food. Oh dear. We have to get this bourgeois capitalist pig out of the live stream. I'm sorry, you got to go. We're gonna send you to re-education. How about that? It's okay. It's okay. Look, we can have ideological differences and we can work them out. It's okay. No hard feelings. Not the gulag. I didn't say gulag. I said re-education.
Oh my god, that's good.
There is a distinction. This went off the rails. Let's proceed.
It's interesting. Okay. What do I ask now? Why turn off? I'll try just why.
Why? Very existential.
Oh boy.
Very suspenseful.
Yeah, I don't... What the fuck?
So we get a, and so I previously said that there's no, with respect to this whole is-ought distinction, that we only get what is. We only get, like, certain, quote-unquote, empirical facts about Petscop based on this sort of perspective where we get a straight-up, just straight-up footage of the gameplay. But we never get what, like, the ought side of things. But I would say this is the closest we come to getting it. So Paul says, Paul gets the message that says, turn PlayStation off. Turn it off. Whereas previously we got this indication that, from the fluttering of the go back button, I read that as, a warning that Paul should not play this game. Like it's a very subliminal warning. And now we get this command, turn PlayStation off. And then when Paul asks why should he turn the PlayStation off? He gets the explanation. Marvin picks up tool, hurts me when PlayStation on. So we get this sort of indication that harm is being carried out, harm is being committed, as long as this PlayStation stays on. And of course, if you're playing a video game and you're just some guy and you're playing a video game and you get that message, it's entirely reasonable to write that off, to say, it's just a video game. It's just trying to scare me. As Paul has done at various points throughout the game, like his sort of skeptical nature about it and about the, whether or not there's an entity in it. The way he frames it is like, this game is trying very hard to make me think that there's an entity in it. So, like the way he frames it is like, of course it's impossible, but the game is trying very hard to make me think that. So he has this skeptical predisposition, and so he ignores like these sort of very direct clues as to what could be going on, which is, someone is actually being hurt. In some way, someone is actually being hurt just by virtue of this PlayStation being on. And so it's, I don't want to get into like a sort of like pedantic conversation about like the, well-being and harm being committed, and like how you calculate that. But I do want to say that, like, in my view, if there's even like a 1% chance that someone is actually being hurt just from you playing a video game, that you turn the fucking PlayStation off, right? But like I said, of course, the problem is that Paul doesn't believe that. Like he's got this skeptical temperament, so he doesn't believe that, and so he proceeds and he continues playing, and he is conditioned to do so, just from the puzzles, right? Yeah, and someone said, I mean, I would also not believe it. I wouldn't believe it either, right? Like if I was playing some kind of, game that I knew is supposed to be scary, I would not literally believe this either, right? But we need to not think in literal terms. We need to think in more like thematic terms. Like it's, on one hand, it's understandable, as I've emphasized, it's understandable why Paul doesn't believe this, why he is skeptical. On the other hand, what is the thematic point that's being made here? That's something we should keep in mind, I think. So, I've said my piece. Let's continue.
This fucking game. This game.
And so he does have kind of a freak out moment here.
Okay. All right. What do I have to ask now? And it switched back again. I think it just... Okay. I don't... So if I put in... What was it? If I put in who are you again, is that gonna... Let me see what happens when I put that in. Again.
So someone is saying... it's even more understandable why Paul continues playing, because Paul's personal details are in the game. So this isn't, he says this isn't just a copy of Silent Hill, right? Yeah, no, it's not. Not for the protagonist. The consequences, or not the, the implications, it's a personal thing for him at a certain point, right? However, at this point, it's not. At this point, we have no indication that Paul has any personal connection to the game whatsoever, other than that he found it in his house, right? So I would say probably, arguably, the first indication that it's personal for Paul is the first censored item, right? But at this point, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there's any personal connection with him,
Yeah, so that's what it said originally when I put it in.
Yeah, and he knows that his mom played the game at some point.
Well, okay, that's bizarre.
Or owned it. Yeah, I don't know.
So I guess I'm going to wait for that to happen again. But I guess I'm going to end the video now, though.
It's another interesting
for
thing
that to
here
happen again.
is the sort of distortion that appears when this when the tool iconography is presented to us. The Paul's avatar becomes distorted in a way that sort of, you know, it doesn't strike me as merely incidental. Let's just say that. You know, it reminds me of this sort of like glitch art aesthetic thing that you see across the internet. In this case, I think it is being applied here.
But I guess I'm gonna end the video now, though.
It's just compression artifacts, bro. Remember being born. I'm not Tiara. Does anyone here remember being born? Anyone? I would say my first memory is, I would have to say, like, maybe when I was 2 or 3 years old. That's my first memory. Anything before that is like totally blank. Someone says, I remember before I was born. I don't believe you. I don't believe you, Majin Ethan. See, I know my first memory is like when I was fairly young, like 2 years old. 2 or 3 years old, because I remember going to the Gulf Coast with my family on vacation, and that was, you know, at some point we had figured out I must have been like three years old at most when we went there. So, you know, I remember destroying my cousin's sandcastle and getting reprimanded for it. That's what I remember. So, little Hellraiser. Or replaying the video. No. Let's proceed to the 6th video. This is where things really get interesting, I would say. It is worth noting that this whole, I don't know, I'm not going to be able to find it again. This is like the first indication, the first sort of text that is clearly intended for like the viewers to help the viewer understand what's happening. This is the first indication we get of that. But it continues later. And I have to say, I do remember this creeping me out. when you see the windmill reverse like that, that's creepy. That is the great thing about this, about Petscop, is it doesn't rely on any cheap tactics to creep you out. It's very simple. Like, on one hand, it's very simple things that are creepy, like the windmill reversing directions. Something that you wouldn't see naturally occur like that in the world. So you know something's amiss. Some have argued this is a disc. I think that's a sound theory at this point. And someone's asking, why display how much time passes? That's a good question. I don't know if there's like an in-universe explanation for that I can come up with. But what I can say about it is, you know, I think this is a case of the work sort of exemplifying just how invested Paul is in trying to figure out what's going on with this game. Because he leaves it on and he records every single moment that occurs in the game. And that takes some dedication. So, you know, maybe it's just evidence of that. That's all I would say at this point. And it's just like the intro to the Gilmore Girls, right? I will follow. Where you lead, I will follow you anyway. I think we just lost everyone. Yeah. I lost everyone on the stream right now by singing the Gilmore Girls theme song. Sorry about that. Someone said, your poor girlfriend. The struggle.
That's kind of fun, actually. Going through a 4-hour video and noticing that on one half of the video, the windmill's going one direction.
So even Paul is noting here how arduous it is for his for him to like figure out what the hell's going on here. He's like going through a 4-hour video and he notices that the windmill reverses directions, which On one hand, that's very. You could very easily, like, miss that. I would probably miss it. Yeah. So, Paul's dedicated.
And in the other half, it's going in the other direction. And pinpointing where the change occurred. And the fuck is this?
The fuck is this?
That's neat.
We still hear it in operation right now. We still hear the windmill.
Well, that's red now. Oh, yeah, I was gonna mention this actually in another video. I've come up here before and seen it. I've seen the camera at this height before. I don't know what causes it to happen, but sometimes I just come up here and it's at this height. It makes sense in this case, I think, because the character was like right up at the camera here. And it seemed to be like at this level.
It is worth noting that I think I'm actually going to note it that Paul states the camera, like, he can't seem to attribute any sort of rhyme or reason to why the camera is like that. And it's happened at various points previously. I don't know what that's about, but it seems kind of important. And if you want some kind of insight into my process or lack thereof, I literally just watch these videos and just take notes. That's all I do.
Well, this is still here. Oh my god. Oh my god.
Trust the process.
Nothing else. Okay. Let's look at what we got.
Yeah.
Nothing else.
Before when he catches, I just want to say there is something disturbing about this caught here. Like, the way it kind of seems leathery, like it's sort of the texture of it, the way it like glimmers, is not something you would see in a normal game. I don't think it's something you would see in a normal game. It's very, like, even the letters themselves are very, it seems like very haphazardly constructed. It almost seems as though it's like if I were to just go into like Microsoft Paint right now and just start tracing out the word caught, like it would look like this. It's very, it's unsettling. And it's like you can't exactly pinpoint why, but it's unsettling.
Oh my god. Oh my god. Nothing else.
So those little details.
Okay. Let's look at what we got.
What are you laughing at? Funny, stupid blob monster, says Mike. That's what it is. Painter. Painting puzzle. Catch Randus first? Question mark. So it's like, it almost seems like the developer is making notes to themselves, if that makes sense. Like, oh, should I make it so they have to catch Randus first in order to see what's going on right now? At least that's how I interpret what's going on, you know? Like the description is so haphazardly written that it makes it seem like it's just there for the sake of planning at this point, and it's going to be finalized later, right? That's what it seems like to me.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
And then the text goes
I
down.
was the only one who still wanted to put him down.
Yeah, that's unsettling. And I have made I've ascribed a lot of significance to this particular line right here. When that dog wags its tail and it appears happy, it's not real. And I don't know, that this line right here really, I don't want to get sappy, but it kind of speaks to me that, like, whoever the speaker is in this case is so convinced that happiness is not really possible, that when a dog appears to be excited and happy, they cannot bring themselves to realize that that is authentic, right? So this is someone who is very clearly in the depths of a very, very dark place. I mean, like, this is someone who is deeply depressed, right? That's what it seems like to me. I mean, that's all I will say. And this is, you know, I'm going off on a tangent here, but this is really what I would say art is all about, you know? What are you laughing at?
Ryan's in the chat.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, and he's telling me to yell things. Like, the bacon is crispy. Someone spilled all my cream.
What have I just walked into?
All babies want to be born.
Oh, that's it. Yeah, okay. That's... Okay, so I actually... This is new to me. I haven't seen this.
Okay, so... Ooh. Null Ripper is in the chat. Null Ripper, I just want to officially, while you're here, thank you for your donation. I remember your username. Null Ripper says, So he's quoting this line of dialogue here. He survived it, and I was the only one who still wanted to put him down. Plus, when the emergency began, you were all looking for Care A. And I told you all we would never find Care A. This is sort of... So what Null Ripper is doing here is making a connection between two different parts of the game. Two different parts of dialogue that we experience as viewers of the series. So in this portion, in the sixth video, we get this line of dialogue. He survived it, and I was the only one who still wanted to put him down, referring to the dog, because the speaker cannot begin to really accept that dog is capable of happiness, right? And then in a future video, we get a different line that says, when the emergency began, you were all looking for Care A. And I told you we would never, you're never going to find Care A, right? Because A is like a representative, like it signifies the ideal state, right? So, you know, I have the screen paused here, and Care A would be in the upper left-hand screen right there. The ideal state. Care B would be like the slightly frazzled version of Care, and then Care NLM, Nobody Loves Me, is the third, I guess maybe perhaps final stage. I don't know. So making a connection between these two lines is pretty insightful. So thank you. And thank you, Chaotic Helium, for the super chat. Howdy. Howdy to you as well.
Yeah, so I tried going down here before, but I think actually that was before I even put in the code. So I just discovered this just now. But you know what? I think actually this, I think I know what this is. This is our ABNLM.
And Paul acknowledges that here.
The shape of this one. And then you have... So I don't know what this is here, though. Yeah, so I didn't imagine you could catch this. I mean, I walked into it. Nothing happened.
There have been all sorts of... excuse me. When I have like one beer, I am like unable to stop burping. So if I burp on stream, I apologize. I'm not trying to be impolite. It's just like my body. It's just how it is. Yeah. But so we have Care A, B, and NLM here, and this fourth field that is totally blank. And the overwhelming consensus seems to be that this like blank field right here is meant for Paul himself. In which case, you know, that makes sense. If we're going along the lines of this whole creepypasta horror type vibe, that this final field here would be meant for him, as it were. It's sort of like the end of The Shining, where you see Jack Nicholson's character, and he was like the caretaker all along. That's what it kind of seems like to me. spoiler alert for The Shining. I would hope that every single one of my viewers would have seen that by now. If you have not seen Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, immediately stop my stream and go watch it. Because it's like the best horror movie ever. Hands down. And I'm not someone that like aggrandizes or like overly romanticizes things. No, that's it. Like Stanley Kubrick's The Shining for me, that is like exactly what a horror movie is meant to be. Anyway.
Discovering a lot of interesting things. Oh,
Found anything weird lately?
Whoops.
There is much to find in
to
this place.
Talk about this, because this doesn't do anything, right? This menu option, nothing happens. I'm guessing at some point you could name your pets.
Book of baby names.
Right, and this was like suggestions or something. Yeah, it's just showing that doesn't do anything. All right.
And just quickly cuts.
All right.
Or maybe this is where Paul sees the apparition. I don't know. I can't remember. So this must have occurred at some point later, right? You'll never go home. It's 2 a.m. there? Where do you live, homie? I believe he asked where is the school, and the response is you can't go back in time.
This game is trying very hard to make it seem like like there's an entity in it.
So at this point, Paul is at least in the emotional state where he can acknowledge that at the very least the game is trying to make it seem like something spooky is going on. He's at least able to admit that, but you know, his skeptical temperament, you know, he is of course unwilling to not actually acknowledge that that's a possibility, right? Ryan Taylor, thank you for the super chat. I don't know what he's talking about. We reached 250,000 subscribers. I have nowhere near that many subscribers. I have 30,000 subscribers. So if you have 250,000, congratulations. That's awesome. Assuming you're not like a Nazi or whatever. I don't know why you would be. I'm just, some people have a lot of subscribers that probably shouldn't have, but I'm sure you're a fine individual. And thank you for the super chat. So, guys, we did it. I'm just covering all my bases here.
Like a ghost or an AI trying to communicate with me. It's interesting. But the way you know that there's a ghost in a game trying to communicate with you is if it comes out, if it stops being distant, and it comes out and you can have a real-time back and forth with it.
A real-time back and forth.
And it stops being so one way. Like I leave my PlayStation and it comes out and does this whole pre-recorded thing.
It's interesting. Someone in the chat is saying maybe Paul isn't acknowledging the game as a way to deny the game power over him. Rather than him not actually understanding what the dynamic that's going on. I mean, I would say if that is the case, then Paul is a pretty savvy protagonist, smarter than most. I have to urinate, so that's a thing that's going to happen. So, just a minute here. I didn't wash my hands. No, I did. I'm just kidding. You guys want to know something funny? Okay. So I have a medical condition known as ulcerative colitis, which is a chronic bowel disease. I'm totally fine right now. The disease is not active because I'm on medication that keeps me totally fine. So there's nothing to worry about. I'm totally healthy. But this is something I'm going to have to live with for the rest of my life. So I'm going to need to be on medication, basically. But anyway, the medication that I'm currently on is called Xeljanz. And my doctor said that the reason they called it Xeljanz is because they determined that the letters X, J, and Z were more marketable to consumers. And so oftentimes you'll find that you'll find that medications often have those letters integrated in their names somehow. And the people who came up with Xeljanz found a way to put all three of them in there. So that's just a nice little factoid for you. That the woohoo, you know. Yeah. Yeah, the chemical name is not exactly marketable. And the chemical name of all of the biological medications, which you'll oftentimes find marketed towards people with arthritis, you know, that's so I will those medications often apply for people with chronic inflammatory bowel disease as well. So the actual chemical name is always like Inixoflub or something like that. I don't even know how to pronounce it. Yeah, Tonactafib or whatever. But yeah, just a interesting little tidbit of info there. A Skilled Roy, thank you for the super chat. He says, "Hi guys, it's me, Petscop. If you'd like to save Paul, please write your credit card number, the expiration date, and 4 digits on the back. Thank you." So Roy is trying to scam you. Aphex Twins, Xeljanz. Yeah. That would be a good one.
And, well, the closest thing that's happened to that is last video, it actually answers my questions. But, it only responded to 2 of my questions, and the first question I asked, I didn't even answer that question. So, no obvious interactivity happening. And it answered the second question, but that could have been a coincidence. Yeah.
Paul,
so, not entirely convincing yet.
No, not convincing to Paul, and he writes it off as a coincidence that, honestly, I don't remember what I'm talking about, but you'll see that he writes off a lot of things as mere circumstance in the game, that he attributes a lot of things to chance instead of what he perceives to be the game is actually trying to make him think that there's an entity, right? So
but I'm looking forward to what I might see next. It's very interesting, this game, because you can walk around and something will just happen, because I created a new file, and I tried to be scientific about it. I went and did all the same things that I did this time, and the same things did not happen. None of the things happened. None of the oddities occurred. Like the thing in the mirror room, for example. So there's a bit of randomness in it, and it's interesting how it doesn't seem to really care if you see everything, I guess.
It's interesting that Paul says it doesn't really seem to care if you see everything. And earlier in the game, we get the message after he answers the phone. There's a phone that's ringing in the game, and Paul answers, and he says, and he gets a message that says, "Care has left the room." And in this portion, Paul says, the game doesn't really seem to care if you catch all the details. It doesn't seem to care. I think that's an interesting connection that might be worth exploring. But this idea that like Paul is going about things scientifically, I think is really this video is what caught my attention when I was first deciding whether or not I should cover it. This game or this particular video is what sort of tipped me over, so to speak, because the first portion of it is this sort of abstract, uncanny sort of mess, right? And then this part right here where he says he's trying to go about things scientifically, I really do get the sense that there's like some deep philosophical undertones to this whole thing. And it's one of those things where you constantly doubt yourself and you constantly, make yourself think like, I could be projecting my own neuroses onto the game, onto the series, as it were. But the more and more we progress into the series, the more I really do think, yeah, there's some deep shit going on here. And so I brought up the is-ought distinction previously, and it really is relevant to say, Paul he specifically says that he's trying to go about things scientifically. So, that is worth considering, trying to connect this whole, Hume's guillotine into the mix. The Hume's guillotine being the is-ought distinction. It's kind of like philosophers call it Hume's guillotine because it's a good way to sort of cut off a certain line of like philosophical argumentation by using Hume's guillotine, saying, no, you cannot derive an ought from an is. You can't do it. It's logically impossible. So the fact that Paul's trying to go about things in a quote-unquote scientific way is like he uses the term science to kind of protect himself, to protect his ego. As he goes about the game, continuing to solve these logical puzzles that get more and more complex. And there's the flip side of the coin that is never really addressed is what's happening right in the moral sense. Or is it, this selfish thing that he's doing to try and uncover the truth? It's not really clear, right? Thank you for the super chat, Ryuk52109. Hey, thank you for the super chat, but I just want to say that this whole comparing YouTubers to one another thing, you don't need to do that. I just don't. I don't think it's necessary. I appreciate the compliment, but I don't think. I think it is a little bit toxic to try to. I'm not saying you're doing this intentionally, but it is something I see very often. Is there's this way of framing things that tries to pit YouTubers against one another. And I really do think that, that's not a great way to frame things. So, I don't know. There's probably a dissertation to write there. But I don't have it right now. So I appreciate the super chat, but I don't really consider myself to be better than anybody. I mean, I do. I should just stop. Yeah. I do. Like when, I'm not going to say I don't have an ego, right? I have an ego, but the better side of me is saying don't. I think it's really unhealthy to try to compare yourself to other people in terms of measuring your value, right? I don't think that's healthy, a healthy way to look at it. Even though YouTube kind of incentivizes that. They try to encourage that mentality. I do think that they try to pit YouTubers against one another to sort of compete in this sort of Mad Max realm arena that is the algorithm, where we all kind of are trying to get the most engagement or whatever. But I think that path, if you follow it as an individual YouTuber, that is the path of insanity, my friend. It's not. If I have any advice for a YouTuber that is just now trying to start out, I will say, don't try to compare yourself to other people. Just do what you want. Do what you think is interesting. And, hopefully things will happen for you. And if not, that's okay too. Because your engagement numbers are not your value. Your, like, the amount of views you get, the amount of likes you get, the number of subscribers you get has absolutely no connection with your value as a person. And don't ever forget that. It is, there are a lot of factors in that are pretty arbitrary. So keep that in mind. That's my advice for newcomers to YouTube. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, so it's interesting.
And that's it. Okay. It's interesting. I think we gotta stop here. We're at the 2 hour mark, just about. But pretty soon here, I will open it up to a Q&A. One thing I wanted to do before I signed off is, so in the last live stream, somebody asked me why Marvin refers to Paul as Paul with 2 L's, later in the series. And I gave my sort of like half-assed response to that in the last live stream. But what I want, I wanted to read a pretty thoughtful comment that I received on the topic. So I'm gonna read that right now. And again, this is related to why Marvin refers to Paul as Paul with 2 L's in a sort of like weird idiosyncratic way. This comment is from an ephemeral collation. And they say, missed this live, but I wanted to chime in about why Paul seems to show up as Paul, again with 2 L's, as discussed around 100 minutes in. We know from Petscop 15 that Marvin is not a term extant in the data of the dictionary that the game's phonetic alphabet system draws from, as quote unquote not in table error is returned when the player in the demo enters it. This is because the game is likely intended to be seen as utilizing a standard reference dictionary as opposed to a malleable database that prioritizes proper names or any customized content over phonetically identical words. Paul is not a functional English word, as in they're saying Paul, P-A-U-L, the name, the proper noun, is not a functional English word, but Paul, P-A-L-L, is oracally, which is oracally identical to it, is. They're saying Paul with 2 L's is a functional English word. This is also why Tiara and Marvin both render Bell, B-E-L-L-E, as Bell, B-E-L-L, which, the latter is like identifiably an English word, whereas Bell with an E at the end is a proper noun, right? Despite our seeing ostensibly programmed dialog boxes spelled Bell with an E at the end correctly in Petscop 12, the phonetic system is limited by what data it can access, whereas the text boxes are likely programmable via keyboard and not accessible via gameplay. And then they say, on a mild side note, that only one word is enterable at a time via controller input and that each of these words is always presented with a capital letter, with a first capital letter, helps to create the illusion that when that when Marvin says Paul with two L's at the end, he is articulating a proper noun. He might be from his own perspective, but this is not how the software itself intended it. Or, this is not how the software itself sort of processes it, right? So I don't have anything to add to that comment other than this person sounds like they know what they're talking about, and it makes perfect sense to me. So I just wanted to highlight a thoughtful comment. And I guess we'll go ahead and do a Q&A here. I don't think I have time to do any more videos, so it's getting kind of late. I think if I have any more to drink, I'm going to say something regrettable. So if you have any questions, let's open it up. Let's do like 10 minutes of questions. So go ahead, go for it. Carolyn asks, how's your day been? Well, I am pretty tired. I did have to work today. Fortunately, today is my last day of work for the next week or so. So I have the next week off, and so I guess I'm in a pretty good mood. It's because I got Christmas vacation coming up, so to speak. I'm also in a good mood because I got this little guy. You see him? So we went to the science. What's it called? American Science and Surplus. Yeah. They got one downtown, right? Mm-hmm. So they got one in Chicago, but we went to the one in Wheaton. West Chicago. And I got this little guy. It's if you can't see him, it's Sigmund Freud with a little cigar. But apparently they got Einstein, and they also have, I think they have Tesla. They should have Karl Marx. I don't think they do, though. So that is unfortunate. Let's see. We got any other questions here? What is the best type of rock? I don't know. I guess I would say minerals, Marie. I don't know. Lord Veneris, who has previously, spoken ill of my ideology, asks, Jung? Question mark? He's referring to Carl Jung. So presumably you're asking whether or not I approve of Carl Jung, who was a contemporary, I suppose, of Sigmund Freud. And Jung originated this idea known as the collective unconscious, from which other thinkers have sort of spun that into this idea that myths are or archetypes are kind of universal among cultures. And as to whether or not I think that has validity, I would say, in my opinion, it can. I'm trying to be careful with my words. I'm 3 beers in here, so please take what I say with a grain of salt. And these Lagunitas have a very high alcohol content. So, but I will say is I think people make a little bit too much of the archetypes. I think there are some strains of thought that kind of codify this idea of archetypes in a way that anything can kind of apply to it, right? If you think hard enough, if you really sit down and apply some motivated reasoning, you can kind of make any story fit into your own little hero's journey, right? So that's what I think. I don't think it's entirely without merit. But I do think people kind of take it a little bit too far. Someone said, if Marx and Freud got in a fist fight, who would win? And the answer to that is pretty clear to me. And this does not say anything about who I favor in terms of their scholarship or whatever. But it's obviously Freud because he was just high as fuck on opiates all the time, right? So that gives him an advantage, right? I'm inclined to say that. Then again, Marx, he could have been jacked. I don't know. I don't think he was, though. Any family plans for the holiday? Nothing exciting. Normal family stuff. Yeah, I have this week off. Other than like getting together and family gatherings for the holidays, I have a few things that I want to get done. I kind of want to rearrange the apartment a little bit. But other than that, nothing all that interesting. Yeah. Someone said, Freud's got the power of cocaine. That is, what more do you need? Someone asks, do you think Petscop will have a clear and definite ending, or will the last video just leave us still scratching our heads? So, I am not one for this line of speculation, but if you had a gun to my head and you were asking me to guess, I would say probably the latter. I would say there's probably going to be a video that's pretty ambiguous. That's if I had to guess. When do you predict your final nosedive into insanity? Listen, the poet of the fall, that's the user who asked this question. I think that has long since passed, my friend. I think we are well into insanity at this point, and you know, we're just beyond the precipice. We have entered the singularity. What happens from here on out is, you know, I could start throwing my poo at this point. And I will say, you know, all these people who say, like, Freud has been thoroughly discredited. Freud has been discredited. It's like, bitch, you don't know what it was like. You don't know. His insights about the unconscious are foundational to psychology. So the idea that he's been discredited about, you know, some of the things he said or some of the speculations he had, all I have to say about that is you know, we need to not throw out the baby with the bathwater. That's all I'll say. Don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. And I think Freud would appreciate that metaphor. So he's got a little cigar, which is obviously signifies a penis in this case. Do we have any more good questions? Caden Clark asks, is Petscop a set story, or is it evolving as we discover more hints? Now, I think I know what you're getting at, Caden. And I don't really think there's any way of knowing. You know, it's sort of this foundational question of, does the creator have a cohesive, does the creator have a sort of cohesive game plan in mind as they're releasing more videos? Or are they just kind of making it up as they go along? And I don't really think there's any way to say one way or another at this point. I really don't know. And I don't, for my purposes, I don't think it makes much of a difference. I don't think it means anything less if they are indeed making it up as they go along. And I don't think the work has any more merit if they had a cohesive game plan the whole time. I'm a true believer in the death of the author. I really don't care what their intentions are. So that's my perspective. I don't know. I'm open to opinions that might contradict that. I do not have any pets. I wish I did. I wish I did have a dog. But my lifestyle currently really prohibits me from having a dog. Because I'm really gone the majority of the day. I have an apartment. Me and my girlfriend we both work full time. And so we're pretty much gone from like 7 in the morning until 6 at night. So that really precludes us from having a dog. Because I don't want to leave a dog here alone for that long, you know. We could get a fish. That's true. My anxiety about getting a fish is they have pretty short lifespans, and I would get too attached, and they would die like in 2 months, and then I would be sad. A lot of maintenance going on there as well. Someone asks, what do you think about the Connecticut connection? I don't know what that is, so please explain it. And someone said, you can get a turtle, and they live for a good amount of time. Do you want to get a turtle?
Sure. Let's get one.
Hey, yeah, I'm open to it. I like turtles. My girlfriend, I will say this. She saved the life of a turtle at some point.
Yes, I did.
We were coming home from a road trip, and we saw a turtle in the middle of the road, right in front of our apartment. And she got out of the car and put the turtle over to the side of the road where it was not so perilous, and the turtle was placed into safety. And somewhere that turtle is alive today, and it has procreated and given rise to generations of turtles. Generations of turtles exist merely because of that singular charitable act. And I will tell you, that is what God is. That's what God is, right there. And you've waited this whole time, and now I'm going to do my Jordan B. Peterson impression. Let's see if I can channel him right now. I have to start, like, crying, right? That's what I have to start doing. That's what God is. That's what God is right there. Individualism. Oh, I'm Canadian.
You need to stop.
I've had a little bit too much to drink. And you gosh darn postmodern neo-Marxists. You're ruining the whole civilization for everybody. You gosh darn postmodern neo-Marxist feminists. You're just against Western civilization. We kid Jordan Peterson. We kid him here at Nightmare Masterclass, but fundamentally I do think Canadians are good people. except for him. I think he should be deported, and he should probably, in all fairness, be sent to Greenland where it's really cold. Or is it Iceland? I can't. What's the difference, right?
Greenland.
It's Greenland. Okay. I'm not good with geography. I apologize.
I think they're both cold,
But they're both pretty cold. So either one would work. But I will say to you Canadians, I love you. You know, my neighbors to the north, you're the best. Except for Jordan Peterson. Fuck that guy. That guy can go fuck off. Well, I think that's about it. I think we should probably end it there.
Ryan says you need to stop.
We have fun. We have fun, right?
Sure.
Listen, everybody. Stay tuned for my next installment of the Petscop Investigation. I hope you all have a happy holidays. New Year's Eve is right around the corner. I want you to stay safe. Don't drink and drive. Stay hydrated, but not too hydrated if you're on Molly. Don't drink too much water. Drink just the right amount of water. And, you know, here's to a fortuitous and not shitty 2019. Can I get a hell yeah? I want to get a hell yeah in the chat. I'm going to wait for it. Hell yeah. I'm going to wait for it. Heck yes. Come on. I want to get a hell yeah. Everyone's just going to go heck yes. Hell yeah. All right.